What's up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of the No Man's Land. I'm Angela Ramirez. Today is October 8th. We have some crazy stuff to talk about, you guys. Man, I didn't hop on Twitter until probably 11 o'clock today. I had some stuff going on, and when I got on, I was like, dang, there's some crazy stuff happening today. So our coverage for today is going to include a few things across the board. We're going to talk about a kidnapping plot that the FBI thwarted to pretty much kidnap the governor of Michigan. Yep, that's right. There has been a plot that has been foiled to pretty much kidnap and charge the governor of Michigan. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about Joe Biden saying that he doesn't want to tell anybody whether or not he's going to pack the Supreme Court. This was covered in the debate yesterday. Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence, they discussed packing the court. Kamala Harris did not answer the question. Mike Pence made sure that was on the record that she refused to answer the question. We're also going to talk about the Jewish community, the Orthodox Jewish community in New York, now suing Governor Cuomo for pretty much threatening to shut down their synagogues. And obviously, they have, I think, had issues getting their schools back open and, in general, worshiping freely, which is a violation of the First Amendment. We're also going to talk about, back on the subject of the debate, we're going to discuss the fact that China actually censored Mike Pence's critique of China. They pulled the debate off of the air when he was covering, the CCP. We are also going to talk about a Texas mayoral candidate who has been charged with some pretty extensive allegations of voter fraud. So let's get into it. We don't have a whole lot of time today, but we do have enough time to cover everything we need to cover. So let's get into it. We're going to start by discussing this kidnapping plan. Basically, a group of 6 individuals, 6 extremists, decided to start a conspiracy to kidnap the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. And basically, I guess their plan was to kidnap her and then try her in their own little group for tyranny. Is essentially what they were planning to do. The plot was foiled by the FBI. The FBI had apparently one of the individuals who was involved in the conspiracy essentially became a plant. He wore a wire in some of the meetings. They also had an undercover FBI agent get involved. This is a very extensive plan. So let's get into it here. This is the press release from the Department of Justice. So here we have Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney's Office of the Western District of Michigan. And it says here, quote, 6 arrested on federal charge of conspiracy to kidnap the governor of Michigan. United States Attorney Andrew Bierge, I'm not sure how to say that, Bierge, announced today that 6 men have been arrested and charged federally with conspiring to kidnap the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. According to a complaint filed Tuesday, October 6, 2020, Adam Fox, Barry Croft, Ty Garbin, Caleb Franks, Daniel Harris, and Brandon Caserta conspired to kidnap the governor from her vacation home in the Western District of Michigan. Okay, so obviously these guys are facing many years in prison with the possibility of life in prison. To get into the details of this case, from what I've read here in the press release and I've gone through the case complaint, it sounds like what these guys were planning to do basically was kidnap the governor and hold her accountable for what they said was treason and tyranny. Maybe not treason, but tyranny. So these guys, in some sense, I'm not sure exactly how closely linked they are to a militia, but they do have some sort of tie to militia groups. These individuals basically held meetings in which they discussed how they were going to kidnap the governor. And basically, their plan was to hold her hostage while she was at her vacation home. They even went so far as to, one of the individuals, Fox, went so far as to inspect a bridge nearby the vacation home, where he looked at the underside of the bridge to see whether or not they would be able to detonate an IED, which is an improvised explosive device, to basically damage the bridge in such a way that police response was delayed. They also went so far as to basically go to her vacation home and conduct surveillance activities, things like monitoring the presidents, monitoring the residents, also taping the area, videotaping the area for video surveillance, I guess. So these guys had a pretty deeply disturbing plot. Now, the FBI did step in. They have arrested all these individuals. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that these are right-wing extremists, and I want us to be very careful here because there's nothing in the FBI report to suggest that they are right-wing extremists. There are allegations in the actual complaint that suggest they were a part of a militia in some way, shape, or form. However, it doesn't specify a right-wing militia. And obviously, here in the U.S., there is, we have right-wing extremists, and then we have left-wing extremists, and we don't know for sure where these guys stood politically. Obviously, they were not happy with the governor's handling of whatever, I guess, the coronavirus lockdown. According to what we know from the FBI, they began surveilling these individuals early on in the year after they became aware of them through social media. So basically, these guys were starting to talk about overthrowing the government on social media. Then basically, the FBI utilized undercover agents and confidential sources to gain more information. The group, according to this press release, says that the group was using operational security measures, including communicating by encrypted messaging platforms and using code words and phrases in an attempt to avoid detection by law enforcement. On 2 occasions, members of the alleged conspiracy conducted coordinated surveillance on the governor's vacation home. So basically, these guys were trying to avoid detection. They had come under FBI surveillance after basically putting their thoughts about overthrowing the government on social media. But that said, we don't know for sure whether or not these guys were like right wing or left wing. It's hard to say just based on what we know here in this press release. But there has been a video that surfaced of one of these individuals. His name is Brandon Caserta. He is one of the individuals who has been charged. And I'm just going to play a short video here. This is him. Okay, so here, just before we get started, I want to point out that there is an anarchist flag right behind him, okay? And the anarchist flag is typically synonymous with a lack of government, right? That's what anarchy is, no government. However, we have seen the anarchist flag flown through Antifa groups. We have seen it flown in the marches for basically like the ACAB marches. We've seen the anarchist flag and we have seen the anarchist symbol used by these Antifa groups. Now, that is not enough evidence to suggest this guy is Antifa, and it's very important not to draw conclusions without proper evidence here. So what I'm going to do later today is I'm going to do a deep dive into this. I'm going to write up an investigative article with all the footage that I can find on these guys, okay? Now, one more thing I want to point out. So there's the anarchist flag to the left of him, and here we have a flag as well. You know, I'm not familiar with this flag, and I wish I was. I tried to do a quick search for it. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to do a deep dive on it just yet. However, I would like to point out, I'm going to enlarge this here. For those of you guys who are just listening, what I'm doing is we have a video here of Brandon Caserta, and there's 2 flags behind him. And one of the flags, it looks to be black and yellow with, and maybe like a P symbol here. And it looks like some sort of logo in the corner of the flag. Now, I don't want to speculate. My first thought when I looked at the flag was that it had something to do with the Atomwaffen, which, if you guys aren't familiar with who Atomwaffen is, it is a far right it's not an anarchist group. The Atomwaffen is a right Nazi extremist group. They are a terror group. They have been implicated in 5 murders that I'm aware of, and they have recently rebranded themselves. I don't know if before they were called the Atomwaffen, but now they are, and they are definitely a terrorist group. They're definitely an extremist group. They put out propaganda videos. Not a good bunch of people. They are definitely neo-Nazis. And my first thought when I saw that second flag was that the coloring was similar to Atomwaffen and that the symbol just below the P is similar to the Atomwaffen symbol. But that said, I've never seen the Atomwaffen flag look like this, so I'm not sure that that is a correct assumption. I'm going to do more digging into this, like I said, and I will be dropping an investigative article later tonight. However, for now, we just have what is on hand at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video from Brandon Caserta. I want you guys to listen to it because it is important that we take the time to look into who these people are and not jump to conclusions by saying that this is a Trump supporter or a Biden supporter. It's really crucial that we take the time to figure out really what this group was involved in. So I'm going to play the video here. Let's go.
And they were literally violently thrown out of there. Okay. Now, they weren't violently thrown out of there by any of the bureaucrats or politicians. That's not who did it. It wasn't a lawmaker who threw them out. Okay. It wasn't a governor. It wasn't a Secretary of State. It was an order-following police officer. Okay? And I'm going to show you some case law right now that will kind of guide you to the realization that these order followers are not here to protect you at all. And I really, really, really want to try to get you to understand that. Because you are not going to achieve freedom by continuing to support these people under the erroneous belief that they're here to protect you. That's just incorrect, and we can prove this.
Okay, so there's the video. I'm going to close out that window now. So, boy, guys, I mean, I hate to say it, but from what we just heard right there, this guy is talking about how the police are not there to protect you. This is why I was so adamant that this ACAB philosophy is not good. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for people on the left. It's not good for people on the right. It is an extremist view that's being allowed to patrol through the streets and spread its message in all sorts of strange places. So, for now, based on what we heard, what I heard just there, we can draw the conclusion that these guys were anti-police, that they were not pro-police. And obviously we can recognize the anarchist flag right off the bat, so we can tell and say for sure that they were anarchists. At least one of them. Okay, so that's that. Like I said, I'll do an article tonight, and I'll probably upload another video, so maybe check back later tonight. For now, let's move on to something a little bit less heavy. Let's talk about Joe Biden. Come on, man. So Joe Biden came out today to discuss he came out of the basement today to discuss basically packing the court. Last night was the Democrat versus Republican debate, vice presidential debate. Kamala Harris was asked the question about packing the courts, and she didn't answer. And Mike Pence called her out on that. He said, "I would like the record to show that she has not answered the question." And that is true. She did not answer the question. She kind of completely bypassed it, to be honest. And that's concerning because for those of you guys who aren't familiar with what packing the court means, the Supreme Court has 9 seats, right? So there's 9 people that operate the Supreme Court. And the reason that there's 9 is so that there's not a tie. There's somebody there to be a tiebreaker. With ACB being, put onto the court, assuming that she gets all the votes for it, and it's looking like she will be put onto the court. There's a lot of concern now that because the Supreme Court is in favor of Republicans, that if a Democratic candidate were to be elected to presidential office, that they would do something called packing the court, which means that you add extra seats in order to gain clout, in order to gain traction in the court. Basically, you're putting the court in your favor, not by playing by the rules and winning, but by changing the rules and manipulating the rules in your favor, right? So Joe Biden today, he was on video saying basically that he won't give his opinion on packing the court until the election is over. Here's Joe Biden. Let's listen.
They'll know my opinion on court packing when the election is over. Now look, I know it's a great question, y'all, and I don't blame you for asking. But you know, the moment I answer that question, the headline in every one of your papers will be about that. Other than focusing on what's happening now. They'll know my opinion of court packing when the election is over.
I can't say I've ever heard a presidential candidate say that he's not going to answer a question on his position until after he takes office. That's a little concerning. So, yeah, you heard it from Joe Biden himself. He says that he will not let you know what is going on in regards to his ideas about packing the court or not packing the court until after the election. Good to know, Joe Biden. Okay, so moving forward, we have some interesting stuff to talk about in New York. There is now a push and shove between Governor Cuomo and the Orthodox Jewish community. Go Jewish community. I will let you know right now that I support the freedom of religion. It is a First Amendment right. You cannot restrict people's right to worship freely. And currently, that's exactly what's going on in New York. Governor Cuomo is, actively restricting people from worship. Just a few days ago, he said actually that he was going to have a talk with the Jewish community about, complying. He said basically if they don't comply with his COVID regulations, he's going to have to close the synagogues. Big mistake, Governor Cuomo. That is a violation of the First Amendment, and the Jewish community is not happy. They have been out protesting in the streets 2 nights in a row now, peacefully protesting. One of the things they've been doing is burning masks. And here's a video of the Jewish community in New York burning some masks in the middle of the street.
I wish people got that video.
Street burning their masks. That's what is on fire there in the middle of the street. And actually, as a matter of fact, today the Orthodox Jewish community is actually suing De Blasio and Cuomo for discrimination over lockdown rules. This is from the Jerusalem Post. Let's go ahead and read a little. Let's see here. Quote, three Orthodox Jews from Brooklyn have joined forces with 2 Catholic priests to file a lawsuit against New York Governor Cuomo and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, accusing them of employing a blatant double standard and barring religious services to go ahead, even as protesters are allowed to congregate in the city. End quote. This is extremely true. There is nothing that is false about this. If you guys have been following what's going on in New York, Black Lives Matter protesters, supporters have been allowed to protest uninfringed. Now, that is actually a First Amendment right, is the right to a lawful assembly. Now, obviously, not all of their assemblies have been lawful, but the ones that have been lawful, obviously, are included under the First Amendment. You want to know what else is included under the First Amendment? The right to freedom of religion, uninfringed. And right now, what's going on in New York is that the mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, will, I'm not going to say his other name. I want to, but I'm not going to. I'll write an article on it. But basically, Bill de Blasio, the mayor, and Governor Cuomo, they are both actively allowing protests to go on uninfringed while not allowing religious services and religious individuals to go to their places of worship freely. So now there is a lawsuit that is ongoing. It sounds like the claimants were represented by Thomas More Society and Attorney General Letitia James. The suit charges Cuomo and de Blasio with violating the plaintiff's rights to free exercise of religion, freedom of speech, assembly, and expressive association, as well as due process, and all under the First and 14th Amendments of the Constitution. In my mind, I don't see how this can go any other way but for this group to win. And I think it's about time that these mayors and governors were held accountable for the double standards that we're seeing across the board, not just New York. This is across the board. We're seeing a lot of mayors and governors refusing to allow people to congregate for religious purposes, which is protected by the First Amendment, whether or not there's a pandemic going on, period. Okay, last thing we're going to cover today. This is pretty interesting. China actually decided to censor Vice President Mike Pence while he was condemning the CCP for their actions and for, the Communist Party regime, basically. And if that doesn't say a lot, I don't know what does. Basically, Vice President Mike Pence was censored. They just cut off the feed of the vice presidential debate. in the middle of the debate. And then once Kamala Harris came back on, and started answering questions, they renewed the feed. So the Epoch Times, which is like really one of my favorite papers. Unfortunately, this seems to be barred, which is frustrating. Anyway, the Epoch Times, they reported with a picture of China's news feed showing that they were playing the debate until Vice President Mike Pence brought up the fact that China is, a CCP regime. They're involved in human rights violations, and they have really done very little to benefit the United States. He was kind of going off there for a second on the CCP, and China, instead of airing it, they decided to just cut out the feed. So, it has like an error image on the screen in the middle of the debate. And then once Kamala Harris comes back on to address and rebut Mike Pence's allegations, China renewed the feed. So it sounds like China, not a huge fan of Vice President Mike Pence, condemning them for their actions. However, it sounds like they were confident enough for Kamala Harris to air Kamala Harris basically on their station. So that's pretty interesting. Anyway, you can take that for what you will. I find it very interesting that the CCP will openly censor Vice President Mike Pence, but not Kamala Harris. Just interesting. Anyway, so I have to run, guys. Thank you all for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. If you want to read my investigative journalism, go to thenomanzone.com, which is where I post all of my written work. The only thing that I post there is investigative work. I do all of my daily updates here on the YouTube channel or on my podcast. And the reason for that is I simply can't write an article for everything that goes on in like a day-to-day news cycle. It's just not possible for me to write on everything. So what I do is I give you updates on daily occurrences here on this video channel, and all of my deep diving work goes on the site. So if you guys enjoy it, please go ahead and check out the site. You can donate if you wanted to. I would really appreciate it. I'm trying to make this my full-time gig. I do have like a little online store where I, pay my bills and do all that adult stuff, but I would really like to transition into full-time journalism and bring you the news full-time. So if you do support my work, please consider donating. I would really appreciate it. If you can't donate, just go ahead and share this video or tell somebody about my work. That is equally as helpful.